Hey friends, it's great to see those familiar names out there. Welcome to Hair Story, our first Backstage Series event of the season. For those of you that don't know me, I'm Sarah Young. I'm the Director of Communications here at APT. And I'm going to welcome Becky Scott, who is our Director of Wigs and Makeup, and ask her to turn on her camera. Becky, welcome. You can, there
Hi,
you go.
there we go. Hi.
Before we get started, I was going to do this before I got you on the camera, Becky, but I was just feeling so lonely. For the folks, I wanted to let you know just one note as we go into sort of the second round of our Beyond the Plays events. We're gonna change our process a little bit, and we're gonna just open up registration. You don't have to get tickets for these events anymore. We're going to just post them on our post the Zoom links to register on our website, and I'll pop that address in the chat here in a minute. But those of you who have already gotten tickets for the next round of Beyond the Plays, not to worry, we'll still be sending you those links via email, but we've had a little bit of trouble with some email addresses, so we wanted to just go ahead and open that up and make it available to everybody. So look for that coming up in the next round. So with that, I would love to introduce Becky. Actually, Becky, can you introduce yourself and just tell us a little bit about how long you've been at APT, etc.
Absolutely. My name is Becky Scott, and I am the Director of Wigs and Makeup. This is my 14th season here with the, asterisks of the lost year of 2020. And I have been in charge of the wig shop since 2010.
Awesome. Thank you. And how's it going this year? I mean, this year is different.
This year is very different.
Talk about what's different.
It's really, really different in the fact that we're only working on 2 shows at a time. And by we, I mean me. Until next month when I have an assistant, I am working by myself pretty much. I have my two gals who run the shows, one of which is on loan to Wardrobe this year, but she's still working with me in the shop. But for the most part, I am by myself working on 2 shows at a time when, typically we're working on 5 in the first half and 3 in the second half. And so it's really very strange to be busy and not busy at the same time.
I was gonna say, how is it harder and how is it easier?
It's easier in I'm not putting in tons of overtime because I don't need to. We don't have to worry now about having to make one man's haircut work for an entire season. We can make it work for one show. So, Brian Monty can look like Falstaff all he wants because he's just Falstaff. We can make a lot of things work to our advantage. And that's actually really great. We don't typically get that kind of freedom. Typically it's like, nope, if you have to have a mustache for a rough crossing, you have to shave because then you have to be clean shaven for this show. And
so like in the case of Brian, he grew a beard, and normally would he probably be using a beard that you made for him?
It would depend on the rest of the season. If we were doing something like he was in, something like Falstaff and he had to have a beard, but then later on we were doing something like Pride and Prejudice or Sense and Sensibility or something that's pretty typically a clean shaven period, we would have to probably do a little bit of negotiating because it's hard for anybody to keep a full beard glued to their face for 2.5 hours when it's 95 degrees outside. So the great thing is that we get a lot of great designers who are willing to compromise and say, okay, we can make this work. But if it's something like, say Marcus Trushinsky needs a mustache for something. And then we're doing another show later where he has to be completely clean shaven because it's the period. Then it's okay. So you're going to have to glue a mustache on for this and stay clean shaven because of this.
Gotcha. And you usually how many people would you normally in a normal year that you would be working with in the shop with you?
Normally I have 2 other assistants with me, and then I have 2 people who run the shows. So it's typically a 5-person shop.
Right. Yeah. So it's a lot. It's quite a lot.
It can be very lonely in here, especially with wanting to keep the door closed because of the, air purifier I have in here, and just, trying to stay safe. Even though things are starting to loosen up and, everybody's vaccinated and it's great, but it's like, I'm going to go ahead and keep that door closed. Well, that's okay.
Well, can you, Becky, launch into sort of take us through the process that you would go through from kind of start to finish? And right. If it's okay, I'm going to turn my camera off so they just see you, and then I'll pop on from time to time.
Great. So typically what happens is the first thing I get are renderings or the costume designs. And then I'll look over those, and then I will talk to the costume designer. And this goes here or anywhere out in the world. Meet with the costume designer. A lot of times I'll meet with the director, and we'll talk about needs for the show and what things really look like. Because sometimes a costume designer will render a generalization of hair. So you have to then talk to them about, okay, what does this actually look like? And talk about research. And they'll do research. I'll do my own research about periods and styles. And because from, the differences between like 1780 and 1801 are huge because there was a huge shift in the world. So I have to we do our own research, and then we'll talk again about, okay, what does this actually look like? This is what I want it to look like. Who is in the cast, who is playing this role. And then we can make decisions on hair color and start talking like detail style kind of stuff. I'll then meet with the actor, or in a lot of cases, the opera singer, because I do a lot of opera. And I'll do a full set of head measurements. So it's circumference and forehead to nape and ear to ear over the top and the temple in the front and the temple to temple back and ear to nape and the nape. And I'm measuring and I'm looking at the nape shape, and I'm looking at I'm matching their hair color to hair swatches I have. And I'm doing a half an hour worth of work to make sure I have a correct mold of their head. And a lot of times, just with measurements, I can do that. And sometimes I'll take just regular old saran wrap you would find at the grocery store, and I put it on top of their head, and I cover that with clear Scotch tape, and then I draw in their hairline. And that way, when I take that off, I then have an actual mold of the top of their head with their hairline. So I know the shape of their head, where if they have longer hair, where it's going to be piled up when I do pin curls underneath it. And I have like an accurate representation of their head, and I don't have to keep calling them in, especially if it's something I'm custom building. I then take that mold and I put it on a canvas block, which you can kind of see back here. I've got some wigs that are ready to go for fittings for Rough Crossing, and this one that's in process right now for a show later in the season. So I take a canvas block like one of these, and I find one that fits the plastic mold that I've now taken, and I fit it onto the block, and I pad it out either with some sort of cotton, or you can pin it. I've seen it with Easter grass. I've seen anything that's soft that you can pin through later that you can like shape easily will go into that whole thing. And then we use painter's tape because it's blue. And as I get older, I can't see the front lace as well when I'm tying. So we use blue painter's tape and we tape out the whole block. And then we take that head wrap, and we trace out their hairline. And that way now we have a full representation of their head. I'll then take that and I will map out and drape a wig cap. And I actually have one here, that the wig that's in process right here and the wig that is right here are built on caps like this. So this is a cap that's built right now. This was built for Melissa Pereira, and this is a very typical wig cap. And it's veg net, which is a really stiffer net that goes around the back. And this stretchy part here is called cowl net, and that is made to stretch out a little bit for when we put her hair up. And then this front part is front lace, which you can see when it's against my hand, it disappears. And that tracing right there, that's her hairline. So that's what we have traced now onto this with thread. And that way we now have transferred all of that. We have now transferred to cloth. And then after that, I'll usually order, I'll get hair together, depending on the color we're making it. And a lot of times we're either matching their own hair color, or we're making them something else, or we're enhancing it, or we're changing it up a little bit. This wig right here is for Kelsey Brennan for Rough Crossing. She is, she's a blonde or brown. She's got a lot of great blonde highlights, but she's, brown haired, and we are making her blonde. This was actually a wig we built for King Lear a few years ago that wasn't used, and she looked really cute in it. So we decided, hey, we're going to use it now because it's the 30s and it looks, she's so cute in it. But this wig here is for Jim Ridge for Rough Crossing, and that's actually pretty close to his own hair color. So we built him a wig for this because we want a specific design for his hair that his hair won't do. And this way, his hair is done in like 2 minutes. And same thing with Kelsey. If we wanted to do Kelsey's hair like that, she would have to put it in rollers and she'd have to use product. And if it's humid out, it's going to go weird. If it's raining, it's going to fall. This way it stays pretty consistent no matter what the weather is, which is always a great thing. A lot of our actresses are, if we say we want to use your own hair, can I wear a wig? Because they don't want to do that to their own hair, and I don't blame them. So we have an entire 2-gallon bag of Kelsey Brennan wigs that look just like her hair because she doesn't want to use her own hair. So in that process, I buy hair. I have a great hair merchant out in LA. Most of the hair comes from Asia and China and India. So we get that in, and then we tie into that net. We start back here, and this is the nape. So this is the back of the neck back here. And we tie a few hairs at a time. So probably depending on the size of the ventilating needle, it is probably probably 3 to 4 hairs at a time. And we do that all the way up until we get to the front. And by the time we're really up here where her hairline is, which you can there we go. We're tying 1 hair at a time. So that way, when it's done and we fit, we'll fit Melissa for this later when it's actually built. We'll hopefully, if we've done all of that work, if we've done it all right, it will look like her hair, but longer or curlier or shorter or, whatever it is. One of the best compliments for the most part that you can give a wig person is, I didn't know they were wearing a wig, because it means that we have done our jobs right, because we don't want you to notice it. Because if you notice a wig, typically, unless it's a hard front wig, like think Marie Antoinette type era, unless that's when you should notice it's a wig. Otherwise, if you notice it's a wig, then we didn't do our jobs right or to the best of our ability.
It's a lot. It's amazing.
It is a lot of work to do one wig, and we do it multiple times a year.
So how many times, like talk about this year and then a typical year, how many wigs would you possibly be making?
Well, for this year, we're not making as many as we typically do, because we don't have huge casts. So this year we haven't made anything until Rough Crossing, which we're making a wig, the wig here for Jim Ridge and the wig for Jamal James, which is still in process. And we're going to be building a little bit more for Cymbeline and a Phoenix Too Frequent, because those are wigs that we don't necessarily have in stock, or they have to match, or, Melissa will have 2 wigs and they have to match. So we'll build them from scratch. And Tracy Arnold for Cymbeline needs a very specific wig that we've never built for her before. So we'll build that. So we're not building as much. We're not building really any facial hair, because we don't need to, which is great, because I hate building facial hair.
Really?
I do. I don't feel like I'm good at it. I think I just don't like it at all. And I have people here who love to do it. So I'm like, you know what? You do it well.
Good.
You like to do it. Great. But in a typical year, we could be building, back in, I think it was 2010 when we did All's Well That Ends Well, all of the men had mustaches. So we built probably 20 to 30 mustaches. We built, in a typical year, we can build anywhere from 10 to 30 wigs. It just depends on the season. It depends on the needs. And a lot of times what we'll do is we'll have a wig in our stock, whether it be it's been built for somebody specifically, or we're just pulling it out from the stock. It was built, years ago for somebody else. We can also do a new front on it. So what we would do is take this front part off, like we'd cut it like back here somewhere, and put this on somebody else's block, sew down some new front lace, and then reventilate according to their head wrap. So that way now it's like, oh, they have an instant new wig in maybe 15 hours rather than 25 hours that it takes to just ventilate that.
Great. That's a good. So folks are starting to put questions into the Q&A box, which is fantastic. We would love to answer more of your questions. And Scott Hamilton asked, how long does it take to do a wig? And he also says, great job. So
thank you. Yeah, it depends. Yeah, it depends on the wig. Until we had the great shutdown of 2020, I could build a wig in about, I could ventilate just tying hair in about 18 hours. Wow. I don't think I'm up to that speed again, because I've now taken, a year off of not building much. So it's probably between, I'd say 22 to 25 hours to ventilate. But if it's a wig that has a more tight textured hair, it can take 40 hours just to build it.
Wow.
Yeah, it depends on, the shorter the hair, the harder it is to tie because of the way you have to hold it. The tighter the texture of the hair, the harder it is to tie it. There's a lot of different factors that go into how long it takes you to build a wig. And it depends on how long you've been doing this. I've been, building wigs for over 20 years now. So, my speed is usually pretty good. If somebody just came in today and learned how to build a wig, it would take them 40 hours. And sometimes I'm really surprised when we don't get more people who go, I've had enough of this. This is insane. I have to go. But it's one of those skills that if you pick it up and you learn how to do it, it almost becomes addictive because you feel like I'm doing something that not a lot of people know how to do. Yeah. And it is really cool. Like, I love doing this.
So let me take a couple other questions. John Chesky asked, for an average wig, how many thousands of hairs need to be hand stitched into that wig?
We get this question a lot, and we never quite figure out how many hairs. I had a friend once who tried to figure it out, and I think he figured out about, at that point, I think about 10,000. But then we went back and tried to figure it out again, and he's like, it depends on how heavy you're tying, what you're tying. So I'm going to go with a lot.
How does hair, like when you buy hair, do you buy it by the ounce or by the pound? I mean, like, how does it come?
The hair comes, the hair that we get from LA comes in, I think they're 3-ounce packages. Okay. And they just come, so what they do is when they cut the hair off of somebody, it's cut off and usually like ponytailed. And that ponytail is then completely washed. It's completely stripped of color. And then it's re-dyed. And if it has a texture in it, it's then permed. So it's got a lot of process that's already been done to it before it even gets to the point where they then take that hair, they lay it out, and they actually stitch along the top of it, fold it over, and stitch it again. And that's what makes a weft or a track. When you hear somebody saying, I have tracks sewn in, that's a weft of hair. So that is just a strip of hair that's been folded over, sewn down. And then what we do is when we cut that part off and we ventilate with just what's left.
Gotcha. Okay. And what the word ventilate, I mean, I know that's the term for it, but do you know where that came from or why it's called that?
You know what? I have no idea. And I have tried to find out. I have asked other wig makers, and nobody really knows. Wig making has been around for thousands of years. There's I feel like last year, one of the jokes of 2020 is I found an Egyptian tomb and opened it, and it was like, don't open it. It's haven't you seen the mummy? But I believe there was hair, like a wig, in that tomb. So wigs have been around for thousands of years. They wore them in ancient Egypt. Wow. Yeah. The process has changed. The process has become more refined, but where the term ventilating came from, I have no idea.
We have a couple questions about maintaining wigs during the run of play. So the question from Jenny is, do you ever need to fix wigs during a play?
Yes. We try really hard to not have to fix something because it gets complicated, but accidents happen, things happen. When I was working at Virginia Opera, I worked there for 16 years. Before I got there, a chorister had gone on stage and he had a wig on and he felt it start to slip, and he just grabbed that front and he just pulled it a little bit, and the whole front, so this part came away from this part on stage.
Oh no.
And yeah, and of course, I know he was like a high school kid and he freaked out, and it was nothing he did. He was trying to like keep his wig from falling off the back of his head. It just ripped. So I've had to come in a couple of years ago. I had to come in and do a quick repair on a wig that they don't know what happened. It just, a tear formed. You're putting, when you're putting a wig on, you're putting in hairpins into this finer lace, and, tears can happen. So you have to go in, you can patch them. If the tear is really bad, you have to do some real surgery to it. But knock on my wooden table here, I've never had to do a fast refront on something because, something tore up this way, or, that's just the thought of that.
That's good. That's good. That's good that hasn't happened yet.
No, knock on the table.
Right. Knock on the table. So Sharon asked, you have to style it after building it, right? How long does that take? And do you use a lot of product?
Actually, we don't use a ton of product most of the time. A wig, when we finish making it, we have to wash it because now we've been, handling all that hair for 20 some hours. So we have to wash it out. Especially if it's a darker hair, it's been dyed multiple times to get to achieve that color. So it's got a lot of what's called over dye. So you've got to wash all of that off, get your your oils off of your hand, that's been on your hands. You got to get that all out of the hair. So we just wash that. And a lot of times what I wash it in is laundry soap. It breaks down sweat. It breaks down skin oils. It breaks down, if it's been previously styled, it breaks down hairspray and all of that really fast. So I just use all free and clear because it works. I think it works the best. If it's hair that's a little damaged, it's got a little dry, I put a little bit of conditioner in it. Because most of what we use is human hair. So if it acts, it's like this, I wash it with shampoo, I condition it. And so then I'll take that and I'll take the wig and I'll put it back on the block and, pin it all down so it stays on the block. And then I will typically put it in rollers. You can see Jim's up here. It kind of matches the tape, but he's got a couple of rollers here and a couple of rollers right there because he's going to have this lovely center part of he's very excited. But so that takes me, if I'm going to put a full wig in rollers, it takes me about 20 minutes to put it into rollers, and it's all when it's just wet. And I just do it with just pretty much straight water. If it's a specific, like somebody's got like ringlets that have to stay ringlety, a lot of times I'll put some sort of solution on it, like a styling solution that's good for the hair, for the wig dryer. And I'll put that in there. But most of the time I'm just using just straight water. It takes about 2 hours to dry. So it goes into, when we can start having in-person tours and you stop by, you can see the wig dryer over here. It looks like a weird kitchen cabinet, but we can fit, 9 wigs in there, and it takes about 2 hours to dry. And then it can take anywhere from 15 minutes to 2 hours to style, depending on what style it is. If it's something like, Marie Antoinette type, it's got to be tall. So I got to put, foundations in it to hold all that hair up. So that can take a little bit of time. And sometimes it takes 2 hours because it's so frustrating that you have to walk away for a couple minutes and just like, okay, you know what? You just hang out. I'm going to walk away and I'll come back a little bit fresh and not frustrated with you right now. And then I comb it, I brush it, I put it in place. I use bobby pins and a little bit of hairspray.
So you do the initial style.
Pretty typically,
or
yes.
You and your staff, and then it would be taken over by the folks that run the wig, in this case, yes, Nicole Bloom, right?
Right.
And then, so how often generally would it need to be restyled, and what's that process like?
It depends on the style, and it depends on what's going on outside. With fiction, when it got really hot, Tracy's wig for Cleopatra was being done every show because it was 90 some degrees and she was just sweating and it got so humid. So if it's really humid, the wigs have got to be done more often. If it rains, everything has to be done. That I get that question a lot. Like, well, what happens? Especially designers who have never been here. Well, what's your rain plan? I'm like, they get wet. Like, we don't really have a rain plan. Like costumes, they can take pieces off, or hats, they'll take feathers out. Wigs get wet. There's no, nobody said it's okay for us to go on stage with umbrellas, so wigs get wet. So then everything has to be redone.
Right.
But I have Nicole Bloom, who is my wig crew lead, is an amazing human being, first of all, and an amazing stylist. And she is so well organized that something happens. She has, when I put wigs into rollers, I take a full set of pictures. And when I style the wig, I take a full set of pictures. And then once the wig is on that actor, I take a full set of pictures. So she has multiple references as to how this wig looks in rollers, on the block, and on the actor. So she can very quickly put some, restyle something. If it's a night where it's not going to be too terribly hot, like hopefully tonight, she may not need to redo anything. It might be okay. But if it gets a little hot, and things fall.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The beauty of outdoor theater.
Yeah. My worst things are always like when it starts to mist outside. I'm like, oh, this is some wig killing weather. Oh, it's awful.
We have a couple more great questions. Thanks to you folks for putting in your questions. We have just really wonderful ones. Patty asks, when do actors get to start rehearsing with their wigs if they want? Anytime the wigs are done, or just starting with dress rehearsal?
Pretty typically just starting with dress rehearsal. There's been a couple of occasions where a wig has had to do tricks, where it affects what they're doing in their blocking, and then we make okay, we can go ahead and put it on for a designer run. That would be the absolute probably earliest a wig would be on stage. A couple of years ago when we did Pericles, we had a bunch of the actors who had to throw on a wig on stage, and it was just these hard front store-bought wigs that they didn't need to be anything special. They just needed to be a different color or whatever. So we got those as fast as we could, got them labeled, and sent them to rehearsal so they could rehearse in them, so they could practice getting them on their heads, so they could get the feel of where it needed to sit, so it wasn't sitting here or my fun thing is here.
Right.
It's like, nope, that's not a center part, that's side part. Okay, whatever. That happens a lot. But typically it's first dress.
Gotcha. And that's when Nicole would join them in running the show. And is it her job to does she have eyes on everybody? Like you were saying, getting their wigs askew and so forth.
Yeah, she is the one who puts on the wigs, and she is the one who takes off the wigs. Very seldom do we give permission for an actor to take their own wig off, because after the 25 hours of ventilating it, and the 10 hours of getting it ready to be ventilated, and the hours of styling it and fittings and haircuts, you're looking at a wig that's worth baseline $1,000. It's a lot of work, and it's a lot of work to get these wigs into styles. And if somebody decides to just take their own wig off and they pull the wrong pins out, the whole thing falls, which now starts a whole 3-hour process of putting that wig back together. Or if they do something and they get impatient and they just rip the wig off, which I've had happen, not here, but other places, and they've ripped the wig, which means then I have to go in and repair it and then start the whole process over again of restyling it. So Nicole and I have another gal who's, again, she's on loan to wardrobe this year, but she's working with us too. Heidi, who they are the ones, they are the only ones who touch the wigs when they're out of the shop.
Gotcha. Scott Hamilton asks, how did you learn the skill? What's your training?
I I learned on the job. I have a BFA in costume design, and I was going to be a costume designer. And then by the time I got out of college, I was like, I'm not going to be a costume designer. I hate that. So I started doing wardrobe, and I thought I was going to do that for, that was going to be my career. And a job came up at the McCarter Theater in New Jersey for a wig and hair supervisor. And I thought, okay, well, this will be great. I'll learn more about wigs. I'll do this for a year, and then I'll go back to, dressing. And I got there and I started working with this really wonderful man, Stephen Bryant, who had been, in the business for 30 years, and he worked at Virginia Opera. And he started training me, and he finally's like, you know what? I think you have a real gift for this. I think you should learn how to build. So he sent me to his friend Tom Watson at Santa Fe Opera. And it's opera boot camp, and it is wig building boot camp. You learn everything: makeup, wig building, wig styling. It's like, really, it is boot camp. And I came out of that first year program knowing that's like, oh, I'm not going to do costumes anymore. This is what I'm doing. And eventually Stephen brought me down to Virginia Opera and trained me some more, along with Jim McGough, who used to be here. He was the wig master here for, I think 14 years. And that was it. Like, I have not dressed a show since 1999.
Wow.
So yeah, I did that for a couple of years, and I found this, and I haven't done anything really since. This is what I do.
Do you all in the wig community, in the theatrical wig community, do you pretty much know each other? Are you a tight knit group?
Sort of. There's actually a really great Facebook group of theatrical wig designers and masters, and we don't all know each other personally, but we've certainly gotten to know each other through this group. Cool. So, I know Dawn Dudley's out in LA, and I know Dawn Rivard is up in Toronto, and, and all of these people that I've never met. But what's great is that, for the most part, for a long time, wig people were very close-fisted with their information. It's like, if they had something, if they had a little shortcut or a secret, they wouldn't tell anybody. And now that's not normal anymore. What's great is that with this community is that you can go onto this Facebook group, for example, and just say, hey, I'm needing to do this. Does anybody have a quick tip for me? Or I'm looking for this product to do this, or I'm looking for this type of front lace, what do you guys recommend? And you'll get anywhere from 5 to 30 responses, and they could all be the same. They could be all different. And it's really collaborative, which is amazing. It's so awesome. And that's the great thing about working in here in the previous years with my the two assistants, who, one of them was consistently with Lara Dalby, who was the wig master at Milwaukee Rep. She had 30 plus years of experience, and she did things a little differently than I did. So we learned off of each other. And every summer we walked away like, oh, I learned that from Lara. Or, she'd send me pictures like, oh, you taught me this. So we do that in this room, and it's great. We all have different approaches to come together for the same cause, which is great.
That's fantastic. And I'll just say about Lara, passed away unexpectedly in 2019,
Yeah.
right, Becky?
Yeah.
And if you in our digital playbill, there's a wonderful tribute to Lara.
Anybody who's ever done an in-person tour, she was the one who sat over by the sink, who would do ventilating demos, and she would do it in slow-mo, and she had sound effects where she would do it. She was a brilliant and funny human being.
Yeah. We miss her very much. And,
and
everybody knows that of the whole backstage tour that you do at APT, the wig shop is, don't tell the other shops, but the wig shop is always the highlight of any backstage tour at APT.
Well, we're certainly the shop where people come in and walk out going, I didn't know any of that.
That's what's so fun about it, is people are like, I just had no idea that all this went into it.
Yeah, exactly.
We have one more question from John Chesky, and then folks, if you have any other last questions, go ahead and pop them in the Q&A box. But John asked, for an actor who has to wear many wigs in the same play due to having many roles to that play at APT, like in the Iliad, what's the greatest number of wigs which one actor wore in a single play?
Oh boy. Oh boy, that's a tough one. It depends on the play. I would have to go back to something like the first thing that pops into my mind is The Critic.
Yep.
Which was, I think 2011, which was just insanity from beginning to end. But I mean, for the most part, the only people who stayed one character were Jimmy DeVita, Jonathan Smoots, and somebody else, just blanked. But then everybody who was in the first act was in the second act in something else. And I feel like there were a couple of people who were even like that. I remember that show, Tracy Arnold had 3 wigs. She had 2 in the second act for the same character. But then in the first act, she was one of the Italian sisters. So she had, I can't remember if her wig was tall or wide.
Because hers was the tall one. I
think so.
Some of you will, because I know some of you on this webinar are some of our diehard fans, and you'll remember that photo that we've used a lot of Deborah Staples and Sarah Day and Tracy Arnold as those 3, and they all have these enormous, beautiful wigs on, and that was a wonderful show.
It's sometimes when it comes to somebody playing multiple characters, a lot of times we'll use a wig, and then maybe we'll use their own hair for something else. And then maybe like a hat with hair in it. Like if they can just put the hat on and it covers everything. And then they have hair down the back, which is an old trick, and it works brilliantly. I know Marcus Trushinsky had a couple of wigs for Cyrano because he was a fop at the beginning. So he was in this, we made him a blonde, which he asked for. And then it was the most ridiculous thing I've ever seen. And we laughed nightly about it, which delighted Marcus. But then after that, I think he wore his own hair, and I feel like he may have had another wig for that. It doesn't happen a ton. We can usually work our way around it. But yeah, I mean, there have been a couple of shows where it's like, yeah, they have 3 wigs because either it has to do tricks or, they have to change characters.
Is there a show that comes to mind as like the biggest wig show that you've ever done?
The Critic.
Yeah.
The Critic, and Cyrano was probably second to that for me.
I always think of the Midsummer, where you had to do, maybe that was just about the wig changes that you had to get everybody in and out of wigs. And
Midsummer was certainly especially this last one we did, was a huge wig build because all of the fairies were very specific and they were all different. So it was a big build for us. And some of them had to go back and forth, but they could come out of their wig and just use their own hair,
Right.
which was great.
Sure.
But when it comes to like the year that we did the Critic and we did the Tempest later in the season, that was certainly our biggest season. That was the year we ran out of room up the hill in the wig room to store wigs.
Right.
We had, I think I counted 47 wigs in the first half, which was enormous.
Wow.
It was absolutely enormous.
That's wild.
Yeah. And then we added the Tempest on top of it, which we had, all the spirits and then and my poor stylist that year, she's like, we literally there's no room at the inn. We have no room here anymore. Wow. So we were like storing wigs in other parts of up the hill.
Oh, that's crazy. And then switching them out for show by show.
It was crazy.
Well, I don't see any more questions, and it just worked out. The time has worked out great because we're just about at the end of our time. Yeah. So Becky, thank you so much for being here and talking to the group. And for those of you that joined, hopefully we will be doing this in person the next time. So, but it's great to have you all here. I did pop that link on our website. It's just the Beyond the Plays page, which is in our events section. So that's where you'll find the links to future Beyond the Plays events. So once again, thank you so much. Have a beautiful Saturday, and thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you.